Hi, hello. In this video, I want to throw more light into the hierarchy between the product, the epics, the features, releases, sprints, and user stories. So, we all conceive the product idea, and then the product idea gets broken down into epics. As discussed earlier, epics are very large user stories or very large user stories which we cannot estimate. So the epics gets broken down further into features and and then we decide in the release planning. We have a process called release planning. So in that process, these features get scheduled into multiple releases, and then releases gets broken down into sprints, and we decide which user story gets into which sprint. So the user story. So to explain things once again, we have the product ideas, and then that gets broken down into epics. Epics gets broken down into features, and features gets broken down into user stories. And we get into release planning. So release planning is primarily we are talking about release 1, release 2 kind of thing. And then we decide which feature will get into which release. And then the releases are made up of sprints. Maybe a couple of sprints will end up in a release kind of thing. So here it is release 1 and here it is release 2, and we decide which user story gets into which sprint. So that means at the end of the planning meeting, we have at the end of the macro level planning or the roadmap planning, we have, at least tentatively, we know the number of releases and which features gets into which release, and the number of sprints catering to those releases, and which user story gets into which sprint. So we call it as a release planning. So at the end of the release planning, we know the product, we know the epics, and we know the features, and we know how many releases and which feature will get into which release, and the features gets broken down further into user stories, and we even get into the decisions like which user story gets into which sprint. So put together, we call this as release planning. It is known as release planning. So thank you very much. I believe that you got some value out of this video. So a lot of groundwork need to be done before we really start the sprint. Prior to the sprint, we have detailed sprint planning meetings, but then a lot of background work need to happen before we reach the sprint level. Primarily the product, breaking the product into epics, then breaking the epics into features, then planning your releases, and then deciding which feature will get into which release, and then deciding which user story will get into which sprint. A lot of work involved for the product owner and the senior management team before deciding on the team composition or before allocating resources to the Agile or Scrum project. Thank you.